Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrive by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 150, we sit down with Terri Boyle Romanelli, candidate for the Southold Town Trustee. Terri grew up on the North Shore, Long Island, spending her childhood crabbing with her grandfather and swimming in the Sound, early experiences that sparked her lifelong connection to the water and to this place. From running a charter fishing business in Montauk to serving as CEO of Manor Vineyard Winery, and now as sale manager at DocuSign. She's balanced work in traditional industries and the tech world. She's also been active with the Long Island Farm Bureau and North Fork environmental groups, bringing values of stewardship, sustainability to the forefront. With degrees from Stanford, LIU, Fordham, and Villanova, she brings both academic rigor and practical know-how to her candidacy. Today we'll talk about her journey, the lessons she's learned along the way, and the priorities she hopes to bring to the Southold Town Trustee Board. So I hope you enjoy episode 150 with Terri Boyle Romanelli. This episode was recorded July 18th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is my first podcast, so I'm really excited.
Thank you. And usually just in the beginning, I'd like to start off, if you can give even a little bit of a background about yourself.
Sure.
Where you were born and raised.
Sure. So my name is Terri Boyle Romanelli. I was born and raised in Miller Place and grew up in Miller Place, went to those schools. My dad owned a bar named Boyle's Bar and Grill in Sound Beach, and my mom worked in Mather Hospital, as did my grandmother, and was there my entire school career, which was awesome. My girlfriends and I still get together every Christmas for a Secret Santa. It's basically the Miller Place Championship Suffolk County field hockey team, and we still all get together over 40 years later. We started when we were 16, so it was a great community. And a really great place to grow up. Mm-hmm. And my dad is from Donegal. He came over with $20 in his pocket and came to work for his uncle who owned Boyle's Bar and Grill, and then he came to own it. And my mother's family goes back to like the 1900s in New York City. And then my grandfather moved out to the border of Miller Place and Rocky Point in the 30s, shortly after my mom was born. And he actually bought a gas station, and then he couldn't turn it into a gas station because they wouldn't fill his tanks because the previous owner never made any money. So they used his big garage for the first Rocky Point Fire Department truck. And so my family does have a Long Island history, which is really great. He worked at Calverton on the lunar module, my grandfather. My grandmother was one of the telephone ladies in Mather Hospital where they used to just click the lines in.
Yes.
So my family was there. My dad's family was all in Ireland, so I do stay in touch with them. And then I grew up right down the street from them. My grandfather gave my mother and my aunt's property, and I grew up right down the street from my grandparents in Miller Place.
And growing up there, you would go crabbing with your grandfather and swimming in the Long Island Sound. How was it growing up there?
Well, so back then the Long Island Sound was a little polluted. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of surprising our moms let us swim in it back then. But thankfully, there's been some legislation to protect it. So it has been recovered. And I do remember going blue crabbing with my grandfather. And then there was a time when the blue crabs really were almost going extinct because due to the pollution and the overbuilding. But I think now, we have become smarter about how we how we enact policies and laws to protect the marine life. And so things are coming back, which is really great. And, growing up then, we came out to the Southold a lot. We would go to church and then come out here for breakfast after church at the Soundview Inn. When I was a kid, there was a field trip to the Lay's potato chip factory. That is now, I think, the cider house. I'm dating myself. And Route 25A, where I grew up on, was 2-lane highway, and we used to play on it in the snow. So, that's how long ago it was. Miller Place was probably 10 to 20 family-owned farms. And so I did go off to college. I was blessed with a scholarship to Stanford University. And when I did move back here, I was kind of shocked at how overdeveloped Miller Place was when I was looking for a place to raise my kids. And that's what brought me out further east, because I really wanted my kids to grow up in that same small rural community with that same environment.
Yes. I was curious, even just coming out of school, did you know what you wanted to do as a career?
What I wanted to be when I would grow up? No. I still wonder what I'm going to be when I grow up. So, no, I actually didn't. When I went to Stanford, my goal was to be in the Olympic field hockey team. And when I got cut my junior year from the Olympic Center in Colorado, I was like, uh-oh, I got to declare a major and figure out what else I'm going to do. And so I did end up staying. After I graduated, I got a job with Oracle Corporation in Silicon Valley. And that started a great career in technology, which is what I do now, in sales. And I work for DocuSign now, and I've worked for several other big sales companies, Salesforce and so on. And so that's kind of what brought me, being in the Silicon Valley is what brought me to that career. And then I was asked to be transferred back to New York to cover a particular product line. And that's when I moved back in the 90s and was kind of shocked at how overdeveloped Miller Place had. It's still a beautiful place. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful place. It's a great school district. It's really awesome. It was just different from what I grew up in. And I wanted to, raise my kids in what I was familiar with.
And we might be jumping a bit, but when did you start running the charter fishing business in Montauk?
So when I moved back, I was in my mid-20s, and that was when you could rent a big house with all your friends on the South Fork. And I was always the last one home, so I never got a bed. So I ended up getting a boat. So I always had a bed. I had the Wild Irish Rose. It was a Sea Ray 270 that I've had since that I got in my mid-20s. And my girlfriends and I would sleep on the boat. And I kept it in Riverhead for a while. I kept it in Sag Harbor for a while. And I captained it all throughout Peconic Bay and took it to Block Island and Rhode Island and things. And then when I was married, my husband at the time loved to fish. So we ended up getting a bigger boat, and we had it in Montauk. And then, given all the expenses, I just thought one day, if we love fishing, why don't we turn it into a fishing business? So I went down to the Montauk Chamber of Commerce, and back then there was no internet, so you just you just made a little poster and stuck it on the corkboard. And so we started doing charter fishing. And so that's how I got into charter fishing. And I was actually studying for my captain's license when I had my first child. And then I just couldn't get the 1,000 hours in to be a captain. But it was fun. I loved it. I loved boating. That was my my summer home.
But then, so were you in Southold at that time, or was that later?
No, I had a place in the city. At the time, we had a place in the city. I was working in the city. And so we were going to the boat in Montauk. And then when we had the second child, so actually, while we had the boat in Montauk, we ended up buying an old potato farm in Cutchogue. And the reason for that was I knew I wanted to raise my kids in a rural environment, and they were young, and we were, just starting a family, and found Manor Hill Vineyards, which was a potato farm in Cutchogue. And so that became a summer house. So we had both for a while, and then and then we decided to plant 5 acres of grapes, and then see how that went, and that kind of started to grow. So then at one point we made the decision we couldn't do both. So we sold the charter boat and then focused on the vineyard. And that's how we ended up having the place in Southold. And then I was still working in technology, and we did have an apartment in New York City, 3 blocks from the World Trade Center, and we were caught in that, my children and I. This community, I'm going to get choked up. This community was so good to us because we had to come out with nothing and just, live in our summer house. And I had to find, something for the kids to do. And I went to a park and I met a really good friend there I'm still in touch with who told me about the Southold Mothers Club. And at Our Lady of Mercy, I went in there for nursery school. And even though they were full, they said, look, we can take exceptions and we'll take your daughter. So that's how we ended up here full-time earlier than I expected. And we are lucky to be alive. It was a horrible experience. And I basically just handed the keys to the movers and said, couldn't live there anyway. So that's how we ended up coming out here full time sooner than I thought.
Wow.
But the community was just absolutely so amazing.
Yes.
And embracing us and helping us fit in. It was just a great experience. And I love it here for that reason.
Definitely.
Sorry, I'm getting choked up.
No, you're okay.
But,
and I guess even I was curious about the Manor Hill Vineyard.
Yes.
Just even starting that up, and obviously the North Fork was changing with the potato farms and vineyards were starting to open up in the 80s and 90s. Was that was something that you saw as like a possibility at that time to develop into a vineyard?
Well, it was. And I think one of the really big drivers then was when Lieb opened up their custom crush facility so that you could, it's wildly expensive to buy your own tanks, right? So it enabled us and a lot of other, vineyards to be able to make smaller batches and get more into the winery business. And so that's how we got into it, kind of grew. And then we sold a lot of grapes upstate and then, and also, juice and wine. And so that's how we got into that. And my kids grew up on the farm, which was really great and a really, really fun experience for them. And we sold that in 2009. And, but that's, you know what? That was another example where the community just helped out wonderfully. Yes. Like, Pindar's one of my running mates, and his father, Dr. Damianos, was a mentor and just wonderful and helping us and advising us. Tom Wickham back then is still a good friend, and he, was advising us, and everybody was just so generous, helping each other, learn that industry. So, and I think, there wasn't really any kind of prescription or anybody even knew if we were planting the right grapes, but everybody kind of figured it out. Yes. And it's been great. And it's really been a boon to the area to keep everything in farming. And, instead of, as long as they're growing grapes and farming, they're not growing houses, right? Because we all want to see that agricultural, rural environment and community continue and prosper.
Definitely. No, I've seen that even because I've been out here for only 3 years now, but just that community support where people come together it's I think it's unique out here than just because I think it is still a smaller community and people are willing to help each other.
I think so. So. And it's the way we kind of nurtured it that way, which is wonderful.
Yes. And just over the years, you've continued to be active in the community with North Fork environmental groups and the Long Island Farm Bureau. What inspired you to get involved, and what work from these roles stands out to you?
Yeah, so when we first came out here after September 11th, I got involved in the North Fork Environmental Council. And, I've always been, you can't be a farmer or a bayman or a fisherman and not really be in tune to the environment and be an environmentalist. It's impossible because you see what happens. When we had the charter fishing business, at the time in the 90s, they had restrictions on the striped bass, which did upset a lot of the charter captains, obviously, because there were restrictions. But look, it bounced back. I mean, now we have sharks like coming back on the shores. Like there was a time when they were rarely sighted. And so I think, being, caring about the environment and just, is something that's always been really important to me. growing up crabbing with my grandfather and kind of seeing the Long Island Sound go from polluted to better, and understanding that really we are the stewards. And so that's what really got me involved in the Environmental Council. And they of course helped push the 2% funding to preserve the farms, and they still have some wonderful programs that they're working on. And then with the Farm Bureau, I got involved when we had the winery, and that was really important to protect the farmers here. We did have more people moving out, and they would complain about the pumps or the guns over the vineyards, and and then we had to remind them, look, like the farmers were here first, and you probably moved out here because it's really pretty. So you know what? You're gonna live with it, and it's only a couple months, and there might be other things happening, but the Farm Bureau protects farmers that way. I used to go with Dr. Damianos up to Albany every year with the farmers, and it was a blast. And we lobbied for some. At the time, we weren't allowed to ship out of New York State, if I recall correctly. So we also, the micro licenses were not allowed. So, there was some good that we did, not only for the wineries, but for the farmers with the lobbying there. And so, and once again, that was just a wonderful community. We just had a blast. And it was, and that, helps preserve our rural agricultural environment. Those two organizations are really important because every farmer is an environmentalist because they know the land the best.
And even just coming up to today, what inspired you to decide to run for trustee?
Yeah. So I've always been involved in the community here. I've been a Boy Scout leader, a Girl Scout leader, and that's of course also a lot of environmental and outdoor stuff. And I did run for office in 2003, and at the time, and I met my current husband, Paul Romanelli. His brother, John Romanelli, was running for supervisor. We were running on the same ticket, and I didn't win that race, but I like to say I won in life because I met the love of my life, and I did it because I wanted to help preserve this the rural character, to give back to the community, to use my skills to help the community, thrive and preserve its character. So 20 years later, I started, getting more involved. Kids are out of the house, that's like a lot of work. And then I thought, what else can I possibly do here? And the trustee position, it made sense. And when I interviewed for it with the Republican Party, I was chosen, and one of the questions they asked me was, what will be your emphasis? And I said, the environment. I mean, we have to protect the environment. That's what defines a community. So I just have always been wanting to give back, help people, contribute. I've been so blessed in my life. I mean, really, my dad had an 8th grade education. My mother barely got through high school. We think she had undiagnosed learning disabilities. And then for me, like first generation, to make it to Stanford on a scholarship is just a blessing. And so I just want to share that blessing where I can with other people and what I've learned.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, even you have degrees from Stanford, LIU, Fordham.
I'm a nerd.
Villanova.
I know.
And now you're working at DocuSign.
Yeah.
How has your academic and tech background prepared you even for serving as a trustee? Yeah,
so I am a nerd, so that's why I got into Stanford. I have 2 degrees from there, art history and biology, which have nothing to do with Silicon Valley, so I was like happy to get a job. So after we moved out here on September 11th, and they blew up my territory, like downtown New York. And I also I had PTSD and could not get on a plane. It took me really maybe even 10 years to go back into New York City. I was out here working the Vineyard, and I started subbing at the Cutchogue Elementary School because my kids were there. And then, I don't remember if it was Ann Smith or Deborah who said, you have a really unusual resume. Have you thought about getting your teaching degree? And I said, I hadn't, but that sounds interesting because I wanted a job where I could be home with the kids. Because it was hard. Back then, they didn't have Zoom. You couldn't be a traveling salesperson and be a mom and get an A+ in mommy. So, that was kind of off the table for me. So I got my degree at LIU. I did teach in some of the local schools. And then I got my administrator's degree at Fordham. And I was interviewing for principal positions when a friend of mine recruited me to go back into the technology space in 2015, which is when I went back. I went into Salesforce. And I've always loved being in sales and technology. And that's where I am today. So the skills that I've learned, sales is a team sport. And I think managing a community, supporting a community is a team sport. And what I've learned is obviously technology. I mean, I was playing with ChatGPT today, and it's amazing what it can do. Like, it's amazing what it can do. And, I've learned collaborative skills, communication skills, and education skills. Because I think as a trustee, we're the first line. Like, we see what's happening with, in our coastal environments. We see what's going on, in the building needs of our community and their homes. And I think, education is part of, what trustees do. And I think I have those skills. I have the technology skills and the organizational skills to contribute to the trustees and hopefully have some good ideas to streamline things and make it easier for people, to get permits through or communicate what they need or contact people. And so I hope some of my business and my business skills and my knowledge of the community will certainly contribute to that.
Yes. And you've mentioned some of the topics and issues going on today. What do you feel is the most pressing issue for Southold? Obviously, we have the waterfront and water quality, and then also dealing with regulatory issues right now.
Yeah. So when Paul and I bought our home on the water, I joined SPAT, and I was really excited because I wanted to grow oysters off my dock. And I thought that'd be so cool. And and when you do SPAT, you get to keep half of them, but the other half go to seed the bay. And so I was really excited because I thought, this is some way I can give back. And then I came to find out that like our little, the creek we live on is too polluted, and I couldn't grow them off my dock. And that was kind of a shock. And so I think obviously marine health, and the coastal community, the health of the entire community is really important. We have an osprey nest in our backyard. And that's actually a really cool story because they started building it on our dock, and it turns out they were two junior osprey and they didn't really know where to build it in the proper place. So we called the Audubon Society, another great community resource, and they came and built a nest for them in the marsh, and they were able to move part of the twigs over, and those ospreys have been there for almost 4 or 5 years now. Wow. So I think that is something we really need to look at. And a lot of it, maybe you need some policies and regulations, but maybe we just need more education, right? So, I think homeowners need to understand more about how, fertilizer runoff affects the bays, how old septic systems affect the bays. Like we had to move ours and put in the upgraded one. And I think, look, it is expensive, but you can't replace what we destroy if we pollute it. Like that's really got to be the bottom line. And I think, yes, building a home, being a comfortable homeowner, being a part of the community is really important. However, the reason people come here to live is because of our environment. And I think that's really the number one priority. Yes.
And I think understanding that it can affect not just right there, but the whole environment out here and affect other people.
Right.
Quality of living and water quality.
Absolutely.
But like you said, it is a hard balance between environmental care and supporting local homeowners and businesses, with talking with them as well as balancing the property rights. But then
right.
What do you think you bring in terms of working with businesses and homeowners?
Well, I think, for homeowners, look, I mean, they're all going to understand we don't want you to build a pool in the marsh. Like, come on. Like, that's not too hard to understand. And I think education is really important. And frankly, I think humans are easier to adapt than the creatures are. So if you need to set your home back a little bit more, maybe, that should be okay with you. Like if you're buying a piece of property that is on the water and you know what you have, and hey, look, there's always things to complain about. Like, could life be easier if we didn't have these regulations? Yeah, but then what would we look like? I am a nerd and a big history buff. And I mean, just look at the shores of, Queens and Brooklyn.
Yeah,
like
Western
those are beautiful.
Suffolk.
Yeah, look, those are beautiful shorelines. Those are all farms. Those, we're kind of the last stronghold here. So if you want to live here, then you should have a respect for erring in towards of supporting the environment versus, building a bigger home or a longer dock or a pool that has a better view because it's in the marsh. Now that having been said, I think what we can do for the community is to streamline things. You can always streamline things. You can always make communication easier, make it less expensive for folks, as they're going through the process. And I just hope that a new set of eyes like mine can bring that to the trustees.
Yes. And then just in terms of your leadership style, just how do you hope to work with fellow trustees and agencies in the broader community?
Yeah, so I am very collaborative. As I mentioned, like I was an athlete and sales is a team sport. And so I look everything as a collaboration and an opportunity to work together. And I think we all have to respect each other's ideas. I also am not partisan. I mean, I have been campaigning. I have to say I hope my Republican colleagues are not being rude to the Democrats who are knocking on the doors, because we are one community, and that has happened a little bit with me. I understand it, but there's no place for partisan politics in the local community, because we're all really a family. We're the family we make that we want to have, and we all want the same thing. So I think it's really important to understand people's different levels of communicating. As a teacher, we had to accommodate special needs people. In sales, I think you have to understand people's different communication skills, be a good listener, and then solve a problem after everybody inputs into the problem. I think, the more people contributing to the discussion, the better solution we're going to have. So I am, I hope people will say I'm a good listener. I know I've been told I'm a good collaborator. I am a leader when it does take time to have, when there's time to take an action, I will have a plan, a well thought out plan, and a reason for making that decision. So that is what I hope I bring, with my experience. And frankly, one of the other things, every year, being in a Silicon Valley company, in addition to the beers we used to have on the week, on Fridays, and we could dress down when we used to have offices, was we'd have to set our own goals and then, review them. And one of my goals always is and will be to have fun. So like if my team's not having fun, why are we here? So it's having fun with the customers, having fun as a team, supporting each other. And I would take that same philosophy to working with the trustees and with the community here.
Yes. And also just looking back from living out here up until today, and what have you enjoyed most about living and working on the North Fork?
So what have I enjoyed? Boy, well, I mean, it's been a family. And so that's been really fun. And even campaigning, like I'm running into people where my kids, they were in my house every day, playing with my kids. And now I get to see them grown up and they're voters and they're getting married and they're doing great stuff. Like, I love the people here. And then one thing I love to do is I love to bike ride. So you see me bike riding. That's kind of my therapy, like my zen. Like, it doesn't matter how bad my day is if I can get a good bike ride in. And I bike ride through Oregon Road, and I bike ride down New Suffolk Beach and Kenny's Beach. And we're just so blessed to have this beautiful environment. And I mean, I was, to be riding on my bike and not even see a car for like 15, 20 minutes sometimes is really pretty unusual. Yes.
On Long Island, it's
on Long Island, yeah. And so, so that's just what I've loved. I mean, it's been a great community. It's and that's what I always wanted for my kids. That's why I have them here. I mean, my kids now have what I have. Like, they get together with their friends that they've known since kindergarten when they come home, and like, there's something really grounding about people who knew you when. And so the people and the beauty of it.
even for your children, have they, because you mentioned that was important for them to be out here. Did they appreciate growing up out here? And because I know a lot of young people that do graduate from here, or sometimes they'll move away, but then sometimes they'll come back.
Well, we all do that. I did that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you did that too.
Yes.
And you know what? It's always great to see another part of the country because it gives you a really good perspective on what a great place we live in. So my kids, they've moved out. My daughter's in the city, in New York City, and my son's down in Tampa. Will they come back? I don't know if they can afford to. That's another podcast.
Yes.
But they absolutely have the most wonderful memories of growing up here. They do. Yeah. And that's the biggest gift you can give your kids, that they just have wonderful, happy memories of growing up. Like, what a gift, Yes. And they do. And I have to thank the community for that too.
Yes.
Because everybody was involved in giving them those memories.
Yes. And then just looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future of Southold and its community down the line? What would you hope to see, whether the environment, the economy, and the character of the community? It could be separate from your role as trustee.
Well, look, it's going to be a balancing act between protecting the environment, having an environment where the farms can thrive. Right? Because that's important, because when the farmers need to make money to still be farmers, right? For the businesses to thrive and for us to have a thriving community with a nice balance. Like, we obviously do not want to be just like all, summer homes. We want to support our businesses so that they are able to provide jobs for our kids. I remember when there were no summer jobs for the kids. I had a lot of them working on my farm. And then when my kids, were a little bit older, they were able to find summer jobs at the marinas and so, that is really important for us to have a thriving business community. And it's a balance, and it's never going to be easy. But I think that's why we have to, explore ideas around the country that we can maybe implement here, which is why I think it is good for kids to go somewhere else to live and then come back. And then just, really think about what we want to look like, in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yes.
I think, it's always been a balancing act. And like, my real concern is really the environment. And look, we have some of the most fertile soil, in the entire Northeast, and the longest growing season in the Northeast. And, that's going to be really important someday, like the food supply. We need to be visionary about that. Like, we don't want to keep putting houses on that. We're going to need that someday. So, and it's just going to be a balance, as it always is. Like, but my vision is that, look, it hasn't changed too much. There's been a few things that changed, but it hasn't changed a heck of a lot yet. And if we can just maintain this nice homeostasis of what we have, that would just be a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Affordable housing is another podcast. So,
yes.
Setting that aside.
Yes, definitely. Were there any last minute things you'd like to discuss or say that we haven't touched on, or even just last minute thoughts for the listeners?
You know what? I just think we all need to work together. I'd love to say, let's just please all work together. Vote for the person who you think is going to do the best job, regardless of the party. Get to know your candidates. Talk to us when we knock on your door. And let's all work together to keep this a wonderful, beautiful, vibrant community. And that would be my wish for this community, that we can just continue to be a family supporting each other and come up with the best solutions to keep Southold what it is and will continue to be. A beautiful rural community that is just a gem in this country, really. Yes. It's really very unique. Where else can you go to a vineyard and then go swimming?
Yes.
Like, you can't do that in California.
No.
You can't.
No.
Yeah, so it's really, really unique.
Yes. No, that's the most important thing. And I think the takeaway in that, preserving and making sure we can keep Southold what it is and what people love about it.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yes. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all your work you've done and continued involvement in the community. So Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you, Chris.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 150 with Terri Boyle Romanelli. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.